I don't wear the collar anymore. I keep it in a box, tucked away in the back of a drawer. Along with a bottle of oil, a cracked rosary, and a few pages from a field report I never turned in. The brass clasp on the box sticks when I try to open it. Sometimes I think that's on purpose. There are things in this world that don't want to be remembered, and Wren Hollow is one of them. I was sent there in the fall of 2005, a remote town in the mountains of West Virginia, quiet, isolated, the kind of place where churches still preach hellfire and neighbors know your business 3 generations back. You won't find Wren Hollow on many maps. That's not by accident. The Vatican didn't officially sanction the visit. It came through a back channel, one of those whispered requests that gets hand-delivered instead of emailed. They said a woman named Riley Thorne, 21, bright, devout, was hearing voices from the woods behind her family's property. At first it sounded like her mother. Then it started to sing. They called it a regional disturbance. I called it what it was, a possession. Not the loud, Latin-spitting kind you see in films. No levitation, no pea soup. This one was quieter, older, hungrier. It didn't want to scare Riley, it wanted to become her. And the way it worked, it didn't growl or scream, it sang, with voices that didn't belong in this world, with songs you forgot you knew until it hummed the first few notes. It sang in the voices of the dead, of your family, of you. It knew your memories, it knew your guilt, and it used them like instruments. I lasted 3 nights in Wren Hollow. The 4th night, I ran. I still hear the hymns sometimes. Late at night, in that space between waking and sleep, the air shifts, the shadows lean in, and just before I close my eyes, I hear someone whisper, "Sing with us." I hadn't heard the name Wren Hollow in years. When the envelope arrived, yellowed, soft at the edges, sealed with red wax, I knew exactly what it was before I opened it. Not just a letter, a summons. Inside was a single typed page and a folded map of Randolph County, West Virginia. One town circled in pen, one name beneath it, Riley Thorne. Age 21, exhibiting signs of possession, and at the bottom, the words that turned my stomach. She sings to the trees. They sing back. I hadn't been active in years. I wasn't on the Vatican's books anymore. I left that life in 2001 after a case in southern Italy nearly broke me in half. But someone still had my address. Someone in Rome. Someone who remembered what I was before I walked away. There was no signature, just a typed line. You've heard it before, haven't you? Wren Hollow wasn't even on most maps. You had to follow Route 250 until it gave up, then wind your way through logging roads that hadn't seen pavement in decades. I hadn't been there since seminary, not since a mentor of mine, Father Klein, warned me that the Appalachian spine held secrets older than the church itself. The place always made me feel small, like the trees were watching, like the earth was listening. I drove in with windows up and holy water in the glove compartment. The sun was already low by the time I saw the wooden welcome sign nailed to a dying pine. Wren Hollow, population 401. God walks with us beneath it, in faint spray paint. Or something else does. The Thorne property sat on the edge of the holler, past the old sawmill, and across a rotted wooden bridge that groaned under my tires. The house was modest, white siding, green trim, shutters crooked with age. But it was the front porch that caught my eye. Every inch of it was covered in salt lines and Bible pages tacked to the walls, and above the door, a crucifix wrapped in barbed wire. Someone was desperate. Her father met me at the door, Michael Thorne, mid-50s, hollow-eyed, polite to a fault. "You're the one they sent?" he asked. "They didn't send me," I said. "They reminded me." He didn't press, just nodded and led me in. Riley was upstairs, he said. Hadn't left the room in 3 days. She barely ate. Spoke only when she was told to, and lately she'd been humming songs that Michael's wife used to sing before her passing 5 years ago. But it ain't her voice, he added quietly. It's something wearing her voice like a mask. I climbed the stairs alone. The hallway was narrow and dim, lined with faded family photos and the kind of Appalachian decor you see in towns where God and country are inseparable. The bedroom door was open. Riley sat on the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes focused on the floor. She looked tired, skin pale, lips cracked, but not broken. She looked up when I stepped inside. "They told me you'd come," she said. Her voice was normal, but her eyes, they weren't quite looking at me. They were looking through me. I introduced myself. She nodded. "Do you hear them too?" she asked. "Who?" I said. "The ones in the trees. They sing now, all night." I used to think it was the wind, but it's not. It's voices, old ones, hungry ones. She looked toward the window, boarded from the inside. "They started with my mother's voice," she said, "but that's not what scared me." "What did?" She looked back at me, her eyes glassy. "When they started using mine." I sat with her a while, asked questions, listened, took note of subtle signs, language shifts, aversion to sacred symbols, memory distortion, all present. But she wasn't delusional. She wasn't faking. She was being worn down. Whatever was outside, or inside, wasn't trying to frighten her. It was trying to become her, and from what I could hear, it was getting close. That night I stayed in the rectory behind the church, same place the last visiting priest stayed a decade earlier. The town was silent by 9 p.m, not a light on, not a voice raised. And at exactly 3:17 a.m, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in 20 years. Someone humming outside the window, a song I hadn't heard since childhood, a song only my father used to sing. But when I looked outside, there was no one there, just trees, and a single whispered line in the dark. "You know the words, Father. Sing." I returned to the Thorne house at sunrise. Michael met me with bloodshot eyes and strong coffee. He didn't ask what I heard overnight. He didn't need to. "She was singing again around 3, he muttered. "I almost went up there." I nodded. "You didn't, though." I remembered what you said. Don't answer when it's not her voice. Smart man, most aren't. Riley was sitting in the same spot when I opened her bedroom door. But something had changed. She was whispering to herself, low and rhythmic, like someone reciting scripture backward. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her hair was damp with sweat. When I stepped inside, she stopped whispering. "I didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did I." She looked up, and for a moment her eyes were her own. "It's not always him. Sometimes it's many, like a choir that forgot how to be human." I asked if it had spoken again. She nodded. "It told me your name last night." I froze. "Not the one on your collar," she clarified. "The one your mother used when you were small. The name you stopped using after the fire." My mouth went dry. I hadn't told anyone in decades. I began the rite of observation. No Latin, just presence, scripture softly read, the kind of test that unsettles the real thing. Fake possessions break under boredom, real ones wait. Riley was quiet at first. Then her breathing changed, her pupils shrank, her hands clenched into tight fists on her knees. "He's coming back," she said. "From where?" "From inside the tree line." At 11:43 a.m., something spoke through her, not in Latin, not in tongues, in perfect English, and not to me, about me.
He still hears his mother's screams. He wonders if they were real. We remember. We remember the heat, the sirens, the metal in her teeth.
The voice wasn't Riley's. It was mine. My own voice, speaking my own memories from her mouth. It was the first time I felt fear, not as a priest, but as a man. She blacked out shortly after. No convulsions, just slumped, like her soul stepped out for a moment. Michael and I moved her to the living room couch. She slept for nearly 2 hours. When she woke, she was lucid, calm, a little confused. "Did I say something?" she asked. "Yes." "Did I sound like me?" "No." That evening I walked the tree line behind the house alone. Nothing stirred, but in the distance I heard something like wind, except the trees didn't move. Then I heard my father's voice again, calling me for dinner. He'd been dead for 20 years. Back at the rectory, I checked the notes I'd taken during the utterance. There were 12 phrases spoken. 3 were direct references to memories I'd never written down. 1 referenced the precise model of stove from the house fire that killed my mother. No demon would know that, unless it had seen it, unless it had been there. That night, I dreamt of Wren Hollow. But it wasn't the town. It was the woods. And in the woods were dozens of thin, white figures standing between the trees, all of them swaying slightly in time with some distant song. They had no faces, but when they turned to me, they all opened their mouths, and my voice came out. The next morning I woke with dirt on my shoes. I hadn't left the rectory. I locked the door from the inside. But when I opened my eyes, there was fresh earth on the floor beside the bed. Mud streaked across the wood, pine needles on the sheets. Something had brought the woods inside. After cleaning up, I visited the local library. It was one room inside the old post office, manned by a single volunteer named Evelyn Dobbs, a retired school teacher who looked like she hadn't aged since the 60s and didn't care who knew it. When I mentioned the Thorne family, she stiffened. When I asked about the land their house sat on, she nodded slowly. "That's the old McCaskey tract," she said, "before the Thornes bought it." "What happened to the McCaskeys?" She licked her lips like they'd gone dry. "There was a preacher in these parts, long before we had a Catholic parish. Fire and brimstone type. Called himself Reverend Josiah McCaskey. Let me guess, he vanished, number he was murdered. In 1904, Reverend McCaskey accused a young woman of witchcraft. No trial, no priest, just a rope, a tree, and a fire beneath her feet. But the woman didn't scream. According to the journal Evelyn showed me, written by a witness, she just stood there, eyes open, singing an old hymn the entire time they lit the fire. She died smiling. Within a week, 3 of the men who helped kill her were found dead. 1 hanged himself from the same tree. 1 was found torn apart in his barn, claw marks along the rafters. The 3rd was found head first in his own well, with his hands clasped in prayer. The church burned down that same month, during a rainstorm. Back at the Thorne house, I found Michael sitting on the porch, pale as a ghost. "She's not inside," he said. "She left." I panicked. "When?" "Just after you left this morning. We scoured the property. No trace. Her shoes were gone, but her coat was still hanging by the door. I checked the woods. Called her name. Nothing. She returned just after sundown, barefoot, pale, covered in scratches, tiny, symmetrical, like someone had raked brambles across her skin in perfect rows. But her face was calm, peaceful, almost. She walked up the steps like she didn't feel the gashes on her legs, like she didn't feel anything. Michael ran to her, tried to help. She looked at him and whispered something. He went stiff, backed away. "That wasn't her voice," he said later. "It was mine." That night she slept on the couch. I sat in a chair across from her with a Bible and a candle. Michael went to bed, shaken. At 2:08 a.m., Riley sat up. Not suddenly, slowly, like something had lifted her from inside. Her face twitched. Then her lips curled into a wide, unnatural smile, and she began to hum the same hymn from the McCaskey execution, and then she said it.
"The roots remember the fire, Father, and they still burn for you."
Suddenly, The candle flared, then extinguished. The air went heavy, and in the darkness, I heard the front door creak open, but no one had touched it. Something came in. I felt it brush past me, cold, like breath down my spine. The floorboards groaned, and the house exhaled, like it had lungs. Then Riley's body arched off the couch, lifted. A low, cracking sound filled the room, her back bent too far, almost breaking, before she collapsed again, unconscious. Blood dripped from her nose. She whispered once more, not in her voice, one more to join the choir. I ran to her, checked her breathing. She was alive, but barely. Her skin burned to the touch. Her fingernails were black. Michael ran in, shouting. He froze when he saw her. I told him to get the truck. We needed a hospital. But he didn't move. "It's not going to let her go," he said. "You know that, right?" I didn't answer, because I knew. Riley didn't wake for 9 hours. I sat by her side the entire time, cold washcloth on her head, Bible on my lap. The rosary never left my hand. At 6:02 p.m., her eyes opened. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just stared at the ceiling and began humming again. Only this time, I recognized the tune. It was an old Appalachian hymn called "The Gathering Wind." I'd heard it only once before, sung during the funeral of a preacher who died preaching against the shadow among the trees. The hymn was meant to warn, not comfort. That night I visited the tree line again. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Maybe the voice, maybe the truth, maybe God. Instead, I found the bones. Half buried, cracked, arranged in a circle behind the old church ruins, most of them small. Animals, maybe, but not all. Some had teeth. Some had wedding rings. In the center of the circle was a single blackened cross, burned into the dirt. Back at the house, Michael had taken Riley inside. He told me something had changed. She won't eat, won't speak. She just watches me now, like she's waiting for something. That night, I brought holy water into her room. As I sprinkled it, her body convulsed. Not violently, but precisely, like every muscle moved in rhythm with something deep and old. Her head lolled to the side and her mouth twitched. She began to sing in reverse, not just humming, full lyrics, syllables flowing backward like time unraveling. And then she said, in my own voice,
"The choir is full, Father, but there's always room for one more."
Michael screamed. I turned and saw him stumbling backward from the hallway. His arms were covered in cuts, crisscrossed and bleeding. They hadn't been there a moment ago. He gasped, clutching his sides. "Something's inside the walls. I heard them moving, scratching from the inside, singing through the damn plaster." I told him to get out. He ran. I locked the bedroom door and began the first rite of formal exorcism. The moment I spoke the first line, the house moaned, not groaned. Moaned. The floor warped beneath me, paint peeled from the walls, and outside the window I saw shapes in the woods. Not animals, not people. Figures, pale, thin, eyes like wet coal. Their mouths wide open, but no sound came out. They stood in rows, watching, waiting. Riley's voice dropped several octaves. She spoke in a dead dialect, something between Latin and Cherokee. Her veins darkened under her skin. Her teeth chattered like she was freezing. I pressed forward. "In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti." A wind exploded through the room. The candles went out. The bed levitated just inches and slammed down with a crack that shook the house. Riley let out a sound I can only describe as two voices crying in unison, one male, one female, both distorted like they were coming through water. She lunged at me, bit my hand. Blood poured from the wound. I staggered back, dizzy, but I didn't stop the rite. I kept going until she collapsed, until the humming stopped, until the air stopped vibrating with unspoken names. And then the silence returned, too complete, too wrong. When I opened the door, Michael was gone. His truck still sat in the drive, but his boots were on the porch, facing the woods. I found him the next morning, half a mile into the tree line, naked, kneeling, and humming. lips bloody from where he'd bitten through his own tongue. He was smiling. And behind him, carved into the bark of a black walnut tree, were 6 words. "She sings with us now, too." Riley woke hours later. She didn't remember a thing, but when she smiled, something behind her eyes didn't match, and when she thanked me, her voice was almost right. Almost. I left Wren Hollow 3 days later, not because the case was resolved, not because the Vatican said so, but because I knew if I stayed one more night, I'd never leave. Riley seemed better on the surface. She could speak again, eat, walk without trembling. The humming had stopped, the voices were gone, but something about her eyes still whispered wrong. Not all the time, just in certain light. Michael never spoke again. They took him to a hospital in Elkins, kept him under observation after he was found in the woods, bleeding, smiling, catatonic. The nurses told me he hums in his sleep now, only one song, "The Gathering Wind." Before I left town, I visited the old ruins one last time. The burned church, the bones in the woods, the black cross in the soil. I brought a flask of holy water and an iron cross from Rome. I dug as deep as I could and buried them in the center of the bone circle. Then I lit a match. The flames didn't take at first. The ground was too damp, but when they finally caught, the fire roared up faster than it should have, and I swear the wind began to sing, low, harmonic, like 100 mouths humming from underground. I ran. I submitted my report by hand. No digital files, no names beyond mine. Partial possession, ritual successful, residual presence remains. I told them not to send anyone else, ever. 2 months later, I received a voicemail on my burner phone, a woman's voice, shaky, unfamiliar. "Hi, I don't know if this is the right number, but my name is Casey. I live up near Wren Hollow. My cousin bought a used vanity from a thrift store outside of Elkins. Says it came from an estate sale. She says, there's music coming from inside the drawers. And her daughter says someone keeps singing her name. She says it sounds like her, but she's never sung that song before." I deleted the voicemail. Then I turned the phone off. Permanently. I don't wear the collar anymore. I don't pray, but I still hear music sometimes, low at the edge of sleep, a melody that doesn't belong in this world. And I've come to believe that not all demons scream. Some don't need to, some only have to sing. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of Wren Hollow. If you enjoyed tonight's tale of ancient voices, haunted woods, and one priest's unraveling faith, be sure to like this video and subscribe to late-night horror stories and true crime. We have many more terrifying stories to tell you, true crime and twisted folklore to explore. Until next time, keep your lights low and your prayers louder.